Welcome back to Learning in Real Time. I'm Melissa, and I wanted to start this episode off with a story, and not really a story, but just about our life, things that we went through and where we were. So right after we were married, we moved to Idaho, and we lived there. We went up to school in Idaho, and we lived there for a few years before we were able to have kids. And we had our first daughter a couple years after we were married. And then 18 months later, we had our son, my second child, our son. So we had two kids in a year and a half. And honestly, after my first, I loved it. I loved being a mom. I loved having the newborn. And then there was a transition with my second son because he was really hard. He didn't sleep. There was different things I did with him than my daughter, and it was hard transition from having just my daughter to my daughter and my son. But I was able to work through that. We were able to get him on a schedule of sleeping, and then it just made things a lot better. And going back to my other episode on tired, probably a lot of that was the lack of sleep that I had, where it just seemed so overwhelming and so much. But once we were able to get that rhythm, be able to do that, then I was actually able to really thrive as a mom. I was cooking, I was cleaning, I was, just happy to have my kids and be able to go out and do the things that we wanted to do and go to the park, and that I loved it. I was excited for it, and the way that I showed up for my kids, to find joy in them, to be present with them, to even come up with little activities and have them help me cook and do all these things. Not honestly, but obviously it wasn't perfect. I wasn't perfect at it. I did, struggle at times. I did, get upset or all of those things. It wasn't perfect, but as a mom as a whole, as I, saw myself, I was able to show up and be the kind of mom that I wanted to be. And then right before we moved from Idaho, I had my third. So she was actually also 18 months later from when we had my son, I had my third child. And it was like just a month and a half or 2 months after we had her that we moved down here to Utah and didn't have anywhere to stay for a couple weeks. So we stayed with my husband's parents, and then after a few weeks we found a house or a townhome and we stayed there. But it was such a different time. We're looking back. I was in the moment, and so I didn't really recognize what was going on really, because it was just there and happening. But looking back, I can see that gradually things changed. And it was hard because I know we went from Idaho with all of our friends, with all of our routine, with our community that we had built there, and the familiarity of everything that was there, the job that my husband had and everything, to Utah, where he became self-employed, and then I didn't have all my friends. I'd been away from my family and his family for 5 years, so I didn't have that close relationship with them like I had with my friends, or all our friends up in Idaho. So just the change of coming here, all of those different things that had just changed in my life, I noticed, and I didn't notice then, but looking back, it's that things gradually changed with the way I showed up for my kids, the way that I felt, the way that I acted around them. I could see that the spark was gone a lot from being a mom. And it wasn't, adding another child. I did have them close together, so my body didn't have a lot of time to recover and repair, but it was also all of that change at once that just gradually I did notice after I had her that, and we were there, that there was moments of joy and there was moments of happiness, but I did feel really down most of the time, and I struggled a lot with feelings of depression and about myself and who I was and how I was showing up. And it was just a gradual thing that came on once we moved here and after I had my daughter. And then somewhere along that line of the way that I was with my kids came a lot of anger, and it was anger towards myself. It was anger towards little things that shouldn't have bothered me and that shouldn't have been as big as a deal as they made them, and the way I reacted towards them in anger and frustration, all of that, that's when that kind of showed up. And I started to feel hollow. I started to feel like a different version of myself. And it wasn't, like I said, all at once. It was just gradually coming on as, okay, this is how I'm feeling now. I feel like a hollow version of myself. I don't feel like I'm showing up the way I want to for my children. I don't feel like I'm showing up the way I had been, and that deep down inside, how I really wanted to show up for them, and I didn't have that capacity. And that's when the anger came a lot towards myself, and then was put out on my husband, my kids, a lot of the times because of those feelings of what's wrong with me. And then I felt like there was something was. And then I tried therapy. I went to a bunch of different therapists, and I tried to just think my way out of it. Just say, okay, my thoughts, I need to change the way I think about it. I need to change the way I think about being a mom, or about the situation that we're in, or what we've decided to do as a family to move here. And I was like, okay, I tried to think my way out of it. And I tried all of that. And yet here I was still feeling that way. And here I am, almost 8 years later. My daughter's almost 8 years later, and I still have those feelings. I still have those, okay, this is how I felt. And it's gradually, over time gotten to where I feel now, and the gradualness of it to look back and to say, wow, like I'm not that person, and I'm not showing up that way that I wanted to and that I did with my older children. So I started looking into why. Why do I feel this way? Why do I have these feelings and so quick to get upset or angry or not check my emotions on the littlest things that happen, that, okay, this shouldn't make me this upset, or this shouldn't cause this reaction to come out of me, and yet these little things do. So one of the things that I looked at and researched, and it came about because I was finally like, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep going on like this. I've tried, like I said, I've tried therapy. I've tried thinking my way out of it. I've tried to say, okay, change my thoughts, because your thoughts do show up in your actions. But then I came across a thing called the window of tolerance that was created by a psychiatrist named Dan Siegel. And it's basically where you have a zone where your nervous system can function. And in that zone is where you can think, you can feel, you can connect and respond without getting overwhelmed by things. So inside that window is where you can say, okay, things feel manageable within this window of tolerance that you have. So that even when things are hard, or even when things don't work out, you can still find joy and you can still be present when you're within that window and zone, or window of tolerance, that zone that you have for your nervous system. So outside of this window, you can have two things that happen. So you can have hyperarousal, which is when you have too much activation of your nervous system. You can have like anger, reactivity, or that you're on edge or constantly overreacting to small things, so that everything feels like a threat and that you're always in survival mode when you're in the hyperarousal state of your nervous system outside of that window of tolerance. But then you can also have the hypoarousal, where it's too little. Instead of having too much activation, you have too little activation, where you can feel numb or flat or hollow, or like, hey, I'm just going through these motions, but I can't really feel anything from them. Where you're in the freeze mode, where you have that fight, flight, or freeze. So here's the interesting thing, is that when dysregulation, when you're unable to regulate your emotions, a change that happens or something in your life that shifts this window of tolerance. So when survival mode starts to feel like not a departure from the window of tolerance and the nervous system that you have, but it starts to feel like, hey, this is my home, this is where I'm now living, is in this survival mode, in this dysregulation, in this hyperarousal, then your window of tolerance actually shrinks. The baseline starts to, now it's, okay, instead of this is how much it was, you have your window here, and this is how much it is to get to hyperarousal or to hypoarousal. Now it's like, okay, I've been dysregulated, I have been hyperaroused for so long that then your window shrinks. So I saw that, okay, this is what happened after I had my third child. It wasn't a light switch on and off. It wasn't, I'm this way and now I'm this way. It was just a gradual thing, a gradual turn, a gradual change in myself where my baseline and my window of tolerance, the ability for me to say, I can handle these things. Things don't seem like it's too much to grow and shrink, or to shrink, not grow, but to shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink, until things that a regular nervous system would be able to handle became way too much for me to be able to handle because my window of tolerance was so small. So everything started to register as an emergency, as in survival mode, as in everything is a threat. And that's where I go back to, okay, what's wrong with me? Like, why do I feel this way? But it's not a character flaw that I have. It's not, okay, something's wrong with me. This is my nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do. So this is where the polyvagal theory comes into play, is that your nervous system is constantly scanning for threats, for safety or danger. Not that you're consciously thinking about it, but it's like below the surface where it's just automatically doing this in your body. And then you have 3 states. You have safe and connected, you have fight or flight, or you have shut down and freeze. So when I moved away from Idaho, I lost that co-regulation for my nervous system, which is the safety signals that my body received from friends, from people I knew, from my community, from a familiar world that we had been in for a while. So then add in there, okay, a new baby, a new state, a new home, a new community, not only a new job for my husband, but him doing it on his own. So then my nervous system was flooded with all of these signals that were threat signals to say, these are all threats. And yet I didn't have any safety signals that were coming in as well. So I never got the message that, hey, it's okay, things will be okay again. It will settle down and feel like a, quote, normal. So then I stayed in that survival mode. And then the window kept on narrowing and narrowing. And this is why trying to think myself out of it, trying to think myself out of how I was feeling and what I was going through didn't work. Because when you're outside of that window of tolerance, your prefrontal cortex, like I've talked about before, it actually kind of not goes offline, but it's that connection is weaker. So like with the other episode we talked about with sleep deprivation and how, after a few nights or a few weeks of being sleep deprived, it's harder and your nervous system is on shock. The connection between the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, is weakened, and your ability to rationalize or think or to have logic is harder because of that. This is the same thing going through this, being in survival mode for so long, having your window shrunk so much that it's not just, okay, this is a one-time thing, but now, okay, this is a chronic thing, that now your window is small, it's in survival mode for so long that you then can't just get yourself out of that by purely thinking because of the weakened connection that your prefrontal cortex has. So all the therapy, all the podcasts I listened to, all the, okay, just change your thoughts, just try to, work through this. They didn't work because a part of my brain that would try to implement these things, that would say, okay, this is, logically here, here, and here, this is how you need to do it. The connection was weakened. And so it wasn't sending those signals to say, this is how you implement what you want to be. This is how you implement what you want to do, because in those moments, it was gone. So it's hard to see and then to understand that you can't think yourself out of a psychological state. And it's not a personal failure, it's just the biology of the way that your mind works. Okay, and then I got to thinking, okay, so I know this. I can't think me out of it, that I've tried so long to do podcasts, to write things down, to try and, to figure all this out. So I can't think my way through it. And so then it's, okay, can anything help? Is there a way to get out of this survival mode thinking and to widen my window of tolerance so it's no longer so small, but I can widen it to be, I can regulate things, I can handle hard things within my window of tolerance that's not so tiny where any little thing I can see as a threat. And then to say, hey, this isn't going to happen overnight. It didn't happen overnight to shrink it. It was years and years and years of being in this survival mode that caused it to be where it is to begin with. So it's, okay, now this is going to be gradually widening it again, widening that window, not through thinking, but through your actual body. To sending your body signals, safety signals, to say it's gonna be okay, and sending the signals that your body can actually receive. Because we were in a new state, like I said, friends, family, and community, and just being around familiarity. That wasn't gonna I wasn't gonna get that back. I wasn't gonna go back to Idaho and get all my friends. We already were here. So then it's like, okay, what other safety signals can I send to my body? And how can I get that out of the survival mode to then widen that and moving forward? And like I said, it's not through thinking, it's through your body. And there are some things that you can do that can activate the calming response physically and not cognitively necessarily. Things like breathing work or breathing exercises, movement, grounding, sensory things as well. Those are the physical things that you can do in your physical body to say, you're okay. And one thing that I looked at was called Yoga Nidra, which I tried it, and it's not a talk therapy, it's not any of that, but it's just sitting, laying down and laying still and helping your body to remember what it feels like to be safe again. And I did it a couple times, and it did help me to relax my body, because I have a hard time with that, just to feeling relaxed, just to saying I can take time for myself. And I have taken time for myself to do other things, to, okay, I'm gonna clean, or I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna go out here and go off on my own without the kids or without my husband or whatever it is, but just to spend time on myself, on my body, to say I can be safe, and this is what it feels like to be safe, this is what it feels like to be calm. And I did feel that after I did it. I felt more calm, I felt more relaxed, to say, oh, my body's actually relaxing. And I wasn't perfect mom after that, and I didn't do things perfectly, but like I said, it's a gradual thing. It's not just an overnight thing, but it's a gradual thing. And you can even, if you don't like yoga, and it is different, I had a hard time with it at first. I had to go through, well, I've only done 2, but it's like I went through one, wasn't my favorite. I found another one I like a little better. But it's like even things as movement, going outside, being outside, outdoors too, or humming or singing actually can release that safety signal to your body that is just simple for you to be able to do if you don't want to lay down or spend 25 minutes to half an hour doing yoga if that's not your thing. But the goal isn't to say, I'm never going to be dysregulated. I want to make it so my nervous system never is in a dysregulated state. That's not the goal. The goal is just to widen the window so when you are dysregulated or you come out of it, that it's a lot easier to get back into the window of tolerance. And that it's also a wider gap between when you do feel dysregulated and when you don't. So it widens that gap, and then it's easier and quicker to get back into the window of tolerance if your window is bigger. So when you do get dysregulated, when you do come out of that window of tolerance that you have, and maybe react in a way that you're not necessarily proud of, or that you didn't want to, that's not really a personal failure that you should take upon yourself. But it's just, okay, recognizing this is my nervous system that got pushed outside of its window, pushed outside of my ability to handle it. But don't beat yourself up about it. Just to recognize that, so then you have the ability to come back into that window faster when you realize, okay, that nervous system has been dysregulated, I'm coming back into it. But then, and I found this in my own life, in the way I deal with things, and when I do react or handle things in a way that I'm not proud of, that I don't like, that I do beat myself up. I do say, this and this about myself. And then I stew in it and I hold on to it, and that anger just builds, and the window of tolerance shrinks because of that survival mode that I've also kept myself in. And so as you realize that it's not a personal failure, it's my nervous system was dysregulated, okay, that's okay. You're able to come back in to that window faster. And it's a skill, and it's something that you have to learn how to do, and to stop before reacting, to have those thoughts where, no, you can't think your way out of it. No, you can't just say, things are positive, things are okay, and it's hard to do that. But as you widen that window, and as you are able to stop feeling like you're in survival mode all the time, then that's where the think work comes in, and that's where the thoughts and that lead to actions to come in to say, I can feel myself getting out of this window, and I can feel my nervous system becoming dysregulated. Because your window is larger, you can start to feel when you're going to be. And that's where it's like, okay, is there things I can think through? Is there ways I can stop this? Is there ways that I can be able to handle this in a different situation before it becomes dysregulation? And then your thoughts can come into play to say, now I can handle this and still continue to be regulated because my window is much bigger than it was. So I'm not the angry mom. I'm not the hollow version of myself. I'm someone who survived a really hard season, a really hard change, and then my nervous system never learned what it looked like to come out of survival mode, because nothing told my nervous system that things were going to be different now and it was going to be okay. So I didn't fail at thinking hard enough. I didn't fail at trying hard enough, or I should know better. My body was doing its job, and now I have this new information. And that's also where my other episode I talked about knowing something and understanding something doesn't always help. Because I knew that I should be, or I wanted to be this other way. I knew and I understood that, okay, I can see that I'm different. I can see that, this is not who I was. I didn't know the change. I didn't know that, but it's like I understood that, okay, these are some concepts. This is how you can help your mind. This is how, you can think about it, and this is how you can get out of that, to understand this is what I need to do. But then actually implementing that seemed impossible. And it was because of my physical body was in that state. But just to know, I'm not stuck here forever. I can widen that gap. And maybe just knowing that it's not a character flaw, it's not a failure on my part, and that it is something psychological, and to not be confused or angry or ashamed at myself for how I've been acting in the way that I have been with my anger and things that I've held inside with that survival mode, to say, okay, maybe that's enough right now. I have something and I can see where it's coming from. And now I have something to work with. Now I have, okay, I can widen this gradually. And I'm not going to feel better overnight. I haven't. But it's something I can slowly widen. And I know that there's many people out there who feel the same way and who are in the same position. And it might not be from anything that I've said. It's a variety of things that can throw your nervous system into dysregulation. And when it doesn't have the ability to come back from that, and it's chronically happening over time, is when the window shrinks. And to say it's not you, that you're okay, there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing, you can't think your way out of it, you can't just change the way you think to then change how you act, but okay, it's a physical thing, that now there is some things you can do to help, and that you can slowly widen that gap. So if you have any questions, any comments, any suggestions, any personal stories, I would love to hear. I'd love to have you share and to talk through this, and to know that you're not alone, I'm not alone, that there's a community and there is a way that we can be able to widen that gap and be able to regulate ourselves even when things are hard. So thanks so much for listening, and I will talk with you next week.